Okay, Peach Bowl, Ohio State, Georgia. Oh boy, the the different takes on this are kind of interesting. A lot of people think Georgia could blow Ohio State out here. Um, you've got this interesting pushback, especially from like Ohio State fans of, they were very down on their team a few weeks ago, but now I don't know if it's like this, I don't know what it is. As you get closer to the game, it's like all of a sudden, like the same people are like, "Oh my god, I don't even want to play Georgia in the Peach. Well, I don't even want Ohio State to get there and get embarrassed." Now it's like, "Oh, I think they're gonna win." It's like, so it's getting very interesting in Ohio State land. Georgia obviously very confident. Their fans very confident, as they probably should be at this point, given how the last two seasons have gone. But what do your numbers say on this? I think it's still like 6.5, right? The line has been kind of the line, right, the whole way.
Yep. The betting market here has been extremely. It's funny because it's been extremely interesting to me, but it hasn't done anything. But that's why it's been interesting because 85% of the bets and 85% of the money have come in on Georgia, and that's via the Action Network, and they've tracked tens of thousands of bets on this game already. This betting market on this game reminds me exactly of Ohio State, Michigan from last year, where everybody and their brother had bet Ohio State -7 all leading up to the game. The line didn't move, and then at the last second, it actually ticked in Michigan's favor at -6.5. So I watched the movement at sharp books, and even though the line itself hasn't moved off of 6.5, the juice from the sharp books actually has gone from like -106 to -110 to take Ohio State at 6.5. I think this is going to go. I think this is way more likely to touch 6 than it is to touch 7, even though the majority of the action is on Georgia, and that's extremely interesting to me, and that aligns with what my number on the game is, which is 1.5. Georgia -1.5, and that's my numbers have been lower on Georgia. It's still very high. Georgia's my number one power rated team, so context, but they've been much lower relative to the betting market for most of this season, and it's come with mixed results on that. I mean, they've had games like Kentucky where they win by 10 and they're favored by 25. But then they've also had games where they've blown teams off the field. So it's been kind of mixed. My numbers haven't had as great a handle on Georgia as say like Michigan. But I mean, 5 points of value here on Ohio State. If I had to pick it at the current line, I would still take Ohio State +6.5. But I think my most likely course of action here over the next 48 hours is going to be to buy Ohio State to 7, because I think this line is way more likely to go to 6 than it is to go up to 7.
I'm not as analytical about this as you are, which you should probably trust Tyler on this because the analytics are the analytics. But I hate this line, so I wouldn't touch any of it. I hate the line. I look at that. I'm like, nope, no, thank you. I have two questions about this game, like broad scale questions. One is, what's Ohio State going to do when they get hit with some adversity in this game? It's going to happen. I don't care, whether they get off to a great start or whatever it is. At some point, Georgia's notorious for this. At some point, there's going to be a huge play, probably by their defense. And then Brock Bowers is going to do something superhuman. And it's going to go from like a situation where Ohio State's driving to all of a sudden they've turned it over and Brock Bowers goes 55 yards and it's, oh my gosh, we were just driving to score a touchdown and Georgia scored like 30 seconds later. How did this happen? That's going to happen. Georgia does it to like everybody.
Yep.
How are they going to react? Because we've seen them kind of, it's not soft and I don't know what it is, but we've seen it 2 years in a row in the Michigan game where things have been allowed to snowball on them for whatever reason. You can call it toughness, whatever you want to call it. You can call it coaching. I don't care what you attribute to it, but it's happened. And so that's kind of my one thing here for Ohio State. For Georgia, they're a weird team for me this year. They're obviously a great team. but it's been very hard to get a read on them. We're not talking about a team who's had like one kind of ugly game. They've had like 4 games where I'm just like, ugh, that's not good. Like Kent State, Kentucky, Missouri. And then they throw in a Tennessee game where that game was not nearly as competitive as the score indicated. I was like, I think the final was 27-13, but that was like a 30-point game in disguise.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to kind of get my hands around what this Georgia team is. And it's interesting. Ohio State seems to run the ball better than Georgia runs the ball this year. Georgia just seems to throw the ball, or like the run pass distributions are not what you would think.
Nope.
So I think a lot of people have kind of like the narrative set for this, and I'm not sure any of them are actually true. I think Georgia's a more, certainly a more balanced, if not a better, certainly a better passing attack than people think. And Ohio State's not a 7-on-7 team this year, like they were accused of being at times the last 2 years. They're a little more balanced than I think people say. So what happens for Ohio State when adversity hits? What actually is Georgia? Like, because to me, Ohio State's a better version of Tennessee, but Georgia manhandled Tennessee.
Yep. No, I think those are 2 excellent points that are going to decide this game. And I think, so to answer the first part, the Ohio State adversity part, I think it's mostly on the coaching. I don't know that players have necessarily played any different when adversity hits. I think they've been coached differently when adversity hits, leading to these kind of snowball effects. I mean, like Jim Knowles, some of the defensive calls in the Michigan game this year that just kind of led to, okay, now we have to play defense this way. Okay, now Donovan Edwards just runs 2 75-yard touchdowns down our throat. I think they've kind of brought a lot of it on themselves once the other team makes a great play, or has a great series or whatever. But then I feel like Ohio State, the coaching staff has, I don't know if it's panic or if they've just gotten tight or however you want to phrase it, but I think it's as much or more on the coaching staff than it is on the players. Now, that being said, I mean, Ryan Day and the coaching staff have seemingly said all of the right things, regarding those type of things leading up to this. They seem to at least pretend like they have a handle on how that's going to go. So we'll see if, aggressive Ryan Day shows up and that sort of thing. But I think it is a coaching issue in those situations. And then as for Georgia, I agree with you. I had this argument with someone on Twitter where they were kind of giving me a hard time because I had Georgia's power rating so close to number 2. I still had them number 1, but people were complaining. But because they were so close to number 2, which Ohio State is my number 2 power rated team. But I was like, look, they played an FCS team. So basically in over 25% of their games, they looked very, very average. So like, how do you, like, the numbers are, I always say, like, the numbers are the numbers. I don't manually tweak them at all. So if the number says that Georgia and Ohio State are 1.5 points apart, it's because that's what they've done, opponent adjusted as far as the metrics go. So I think this is going to be a lot closer than people think. I don't know that I buy into, Ryan Day saying like, well, no one gives us a chance to win this game. I mean, I think there are people that give them a chance to win the game. I mean, the line, it's not like the line's 17, so I think they're going to have a puncher's chance. But I honestly, the adversity question that you posed, I think is probably the biggest key is when Georgia inevitably makes a huge play or has a huge series, how do you respond to that? And in my opinion, it's from a coaching standpoint, from a play calling standpoint. Do you shell up and become a turtle and try to play not to lose, which in my opinion is what they did against Michigan, and it backfired on them. So I'm very curious to see how the coaching staff handles this game.
I don't know how popular my stance on what Ohio State needs to do is going to be, especially from Ohio State fans. But I actually think, he's talked about some of the narratives that are out there and how maybe they're not quite accurate if you actually look at, the run pass distributions of both teams. I think Ohio State has to make this a 7-on-7 game. I'm not saying just completely abandon the run. And this is actually very anti me. I'm very much a run the ball. Like my NFL team's the Philadelphia Eagles. I've been screaming at them for years to run the ball. Up until very recently, I haven't had to do it anymore because they do it now. But like, that's been my thing for years, run the ball. And even last couple of years with Ohio State, I'm watching like the Northwestern game a couple of years ago. And I'm like, I have a tweet. It was very, I haven't always had the best time tweets. This was the best time tweet I've ever had. There was a point in the first half of that Northwestern game where I said, in the Big Ten championship game, I said, every time Ryan Day doesn't hand the ball off is coaching malpractice. And this was early in the game. And then Trey Sermon got rolling and had 8,000 yards or whatever it was the rest of the game. So I'm usually run the ball guy. So I'm just saying that for context. I'm usually run the ball guy. I think Ohio State's path to winning this game against Georgia is to throw the ball like 50 times and mix in the run off of that.
Yep.
I think that's where their matchups are. Well, I think they're on the outside. I think they're outside the hashes. And I think that's the type of game they're going to have to play, and they're going to have to play it, 35-31. I don't think, if this game's 27-13, it's going to be Georgia 27-13.
Yep.
So that's my thought on the Ohio State angle. I would throw it 30 times in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s direction.
Yeah.
And live with that. And that may drive Ohio State fans insane that I'm saying that, but I think that's the matchup in this game.
Yeah. I was just telling someone this yesterday. If Ohio State loses because they only target Marvin Harrison 4 times, like, to me, that is just unacceptable. Like, if you're going to lose to a great Georgia team, do it by trying to ride your thoroughbred, target Marvin Harrison 12 times, 15 times, and just force feed him, because I feel like they went away from him in the Michigan game. They hit the one deep shot down the right sideline, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it didn't seem like they were going to him often at all, not nearly enough. I think in this game, we assume that Keely Ringo is going to be on him quite a bit. I think you got to make Keely Ringo cover him and take your chance with some 50-50 balls, because as one of the Georgia writers that I heard say, like, that's something that Georgia has kind of struggled with, in the Tennessee game, that was an issue, or I'm sorry, in the Kentucky game, that was an issue. And in the Missouri game, that was an issue where quarterbacks are giving the receivers a chance to make a play, and the Georgia defensive backs are not making those plays. It's in favor of the receiver. And when you've got the best receiver in the country, I don't know why that's not a 50-50 ball. That's like a 70-30 ball most of the time.
Yeah, I would get away from worrying about these narratives, 7-on-7 team, soft, fine. Yeah. Let people say throw the ball 50 times. I would throw the ball 50 times.
No one's going to say that if you win. So
exactly. But I was like, don't come into this game thinking you've got to like establish the run to prove a point. Like, no,
you can't do that now.
Get the ball to your best players. Just get the ball to your best players. Like, your best players are Harrison Jr., Stroud, Abuka.
Yep.
Their running back room has been, they've almost been shockingly productive running the football this year, given that they've used like 6 different backs at this point. None of their top backs have been healthy since like the middle of September. So they've been like shockingly good. But if they lose this game and Marvin Harrison Jr. has like 4 or 5 catches and Mayan Williams has 20 carries, I just think that's a travesty. I just do. And it's not a knock on Mayan, who I think has been a warrior this year. I just think that is, I think you've let the narratives and the media and the fans and everyone get in your head at that point, and you've lost a game, before you even had a chance to win it, because you tried to, we're going to show you we're tough, or we're going to, just air it out. I think you have to. I really do. On the other end, again, I get back to this with Georgia. And this is where my pick is. This is why my pick is my pick. So I've got Georgia winning a close game. I think it's going to be a very tight game. I do. I think this is going to come down. I think it's going to be between a 3 and 6 point game. So in that sense, even though I said I hated the line, I guess in that sense, I should probably take Ohio State if I think that's going to be the case. But on the betting front, but I went back and forth this week, and what I ended on was, which team is more likely to not flinch in the fourth quarter? when a big play is made one direction or the other. Like, which team is the least likely to flinch? And I think that's very clearly Georgia. And that's why until I see this Ohio State group kind of go through it and not flinch, I have to go with the team who I've seen not flinch the last 2 years.
Yep. No, I agree 100% with that. I think if I had to make a pick straight up, I think Georgia wins a tight game. But I do think Ohio State can keep it competitive. And again, if they do all the things they say and all of that, like they're gonna have every opportunity, I think, to win the game. But I'm with you. I think when it comes down to crunch time in a tight game, I think I would definitely trust Georgia more at this point than I trust Ohio State.
Yeah, I just, and it's interesting because I think Ohio State has some very interesting. I think there's some very interesting matchups. I think Ohio State has a legitimate. I know Georgia's got a really good secondary, but I do think Ohio State's got some good matchups on the outside at receiver. And I think the way Georgia moves the ball, specifically through the air, where it is a lot of Brock Bowers, a lot of tight ends, I don't think Georgia has like this huge advantage on the outside because I think what you expect is like Ohio State's corners. Oh, can they hold up? I don't know that Georgia's receivers are as threatening to Ohio State. So I think Ohio State's safeties are have been better than their corners this year. I think in some ways the way Georgia's offense is very good, but in the ways they move the ball don't actually line up perfectly with Ohio State's weaknesses. They actually kind of line up, I think, with Ohio State's strengths defensively. So there are some things there that might lead me to pick Ohio State to get the upset here. I don't think it'd be a monumental upset or anything like that, but there are some things that would lead me to picking Ohio State here. But I can't get away from, the way we've seen Ohio State look the last couple of years against Michigan. And even this year, a little bit, like, tightening up a little bit against Penn State, tightening up a little bit against Maryland, just certain things. And then you watch kind of Georgia, get punched in the mouth by Missouri and then kind of go on that run at the end of the game and just, do what they need to do on both sides of the ball, come back, win the game. LSU punches them in the mouth a little bit at the beginning of the SEC championship. They come and blow their doors off. The way they prepped for Tennessee just came out. I've just seen Georgia rise to the occasion in too many of these games the last 2 years. And that's probably not a very analytical way of approaching this, but it's just kind of what my eyeballs have told me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. I think in a one score game, it's going to come down to who do you trust more to stiffen up and make plays down the stretch and not, like you said, flinch. And I think in that, when you break it down that way, I think you would have to lean Georgia.
I'm excited. I think there'll be two great games. I know that's not really the normal. I know the normal is maybe you'll get a good game, but one of these two is almost always just a total blowout, and sometimes you get two blowouts. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think for the first, maybe even might be the first time. I think we're going to get two really good games, one score games. Okay, maybe someone wins by 10 on a late touchdown or something like that, but I don't think we're going to see a blowout. And I know that could be a freezing cold take in a few days, because again, the history of this tells us we're going to get at least one, if not two we're more likely to get two blowouts than we already get two competitive games. I think this year will buck the trend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my numbers would agree with that also.
All right. Well, I think we've covered enough ground here for this episode. Appreciate everyone watching on College Football Playbook. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's youtube.com/@CFB Playbook. Please subscribe to the channel. You can also find us on all the podcast platforms. So please subscribe to us on those. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anything like that, you can subscribe to the podcast that way. But again, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video, and we'll have more coming here as the weekend unfolds and we see what's next. So thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next time.